Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are just waiting a few more minutes for any other attendees, and then we'll kick things off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Douglas Morris. I'm the Experience Optimisation Director at Ratio. We are a digital marketing agency in the UK. And today I'm going to be talking about experiential marketing and optimization, which I will be making the case is a way of working and a framework that I'll introduce that can get you better, faster acquisition, retention, and return on investment outcomes. So when I say experiential marketing, I am not referring to these sorts of experiential marketing from brands like Red Bull. Rather, I'm talking about a way of working and an outlook from a marketing perspective that tries to put customer experience at the heart of what we do in terms of the tactics that we launch, in terms of the ways of working and processes that we develop within our organizations. And this is really what I'll be making the case could drive some transformational outcomes for your organizations. So firstly, because customer experience is not necessarily something that marketers are used to talking about, are used to measuring, are used to optimizing for, we should touch on what customer experience actually is and, well, why it must matter to you. Why is it that customer experience is going to help you achieve the outcomes that you're after in your role as a marketer? So customer experience, in short, is the way that customers perceive their interactions with your brand. So it's about how people feel about doing business with you. It's not necessarily rational. It's more of a perception, a feeling, an impression that customers have after all the different interactions that they have with you. Throughout a customer journey, as there is one depicted just here with 1 million different touch points, a customer is going to come into contact with your business many different times. Could be online, offline, could be through a variety of different channels, either online or offline. And at every single one of those moments, they could be considered a moment of truth where you have the ability to improve the perception that someone has of your customer experience, or it could be an opportunity or a touch point, or a moment of truth, I should say, where the customer develops a slightly more negative perception of your brand, of your organization, of your customer experience. And so what we really need to consider is that every single time that a customer comes into contact with you, when every single time that they have a need they're looking for you to fulfill, that is an opportunity for you to do a bit better to win or to lose this customer experience battle. What we're seeing more and more is that customer experience expectations aren't actually being set just by you or your direct competitors. So in the olden days, quote unquote, 10, 20 years ago, if a customer's thinking about or setting expectations around what experience they are wanting you to deliver, that's going to be driven heavily by the experience that organizations like you are delivering. So if you are a bank, you probably had a little bit more leeway to get away with poor customer experience because all banks had poor customer experience. But we're not in that age anymore. We're in a time where customers are not comparing your experience to your competitors. They're comparing your experience to the best experience that they've ever had, even in a B2B context, because the people that you're hoping to sell to are themselves consumers of these amazing customer experiences, and from Uber, from Apple, from Zappos, from Amazon, whomever. And that's now become the benchmark against which your customer experience is being measured. So there's a really interesting Salesforce report that I'd encourage you to read that came out just recently. And in it, they revealed that 67% of customers are saying that their standard for what a good customer experience is higher than ever before. So that just goes to show that that expectations are ever increasing. This means that the paradigm from a marketing perspective has shifted, and it's not just that. As I mentioned, these customers have a slightly more or less favorable impression of your organization and your customer experience each time they interact with you, and that it doesn't really matter because that happens in a vacuum, but hey, you've got these amazing unique selling points and your service is actually like the actual service you deliver is really good. So who cares about customer experience? Actually, customers are saying that the experience that they're receiving from the brands they're engaging with is as or more important than even the product or services that the brand delivers. That's 80% of customers say that. 57% of customers stop buying from a company because they think a competitor provides a better experience. So there's you can see from this that customer experience actually drives conversion, it drives retention, and that means that it drives return on investment from a marketing point of view, and that means that it's not something that we can ignore any longer. So what are the drivers of a great customer experience, and what can we actually do to leverage those drivers to improve our customer experience? Because obviously if we're not used to thinking in terms of a customer experience, then we are probably not used to thinking in terms of how or where the opportunities are to improve it either. So there's a bunch of research out there, not focusing on digital specifically, but many organizations have published research summarizing the varying factors that they think are involved in driving an amazing customer experience. So we have this pretty good framework from KPMG from a B2C perspective, and there's a framework from an organization called B2B International from a B2B perspective, as the name would imply. And I'd encourage you to go and have a read of these and unpick the different factors that they're saying are important and why that's the case. But it is pretty self-explanatory, especially as we are ourselves also customers. So we should be able to appreciate why some of these things are beneficial in terms of the experience that you're receiving. So, for example, KPMG number would say that personalization is one of the key pillars of customer experience. And of course, if a brand is delivering a more tailored, a more relevant experience to you, then that's going to be a better experience for you. Time and effort is a key pillar in customer experience in this KPMG number framework. It makes sense, right? If it's a frustrating experience to deal with a brand, if it takes half an hour to do what you think should only take 5 minutes. If you're trying to apply for something online, or if you're trying to find a particular product on their website, or whatever it is, that's going to be not something that leaves you with a good taste in your mouth as far as the experience that you might receive from that organization moving forward. So just some examples of the ways that these CX pillars play out in terms of things that we can actually do as marketers to influence them are, for example, as it relates to personalization or seamlessness, as in the B2B framework. You could be looking at a two-way, trying to move towards a two-way CRM website integration, which means that if something happens on the website, your salespeople, your account managers, your customer-facing people offline know it because it came through to your CRM, or vice versa. If some interaction happened offline and there's an opportunity to influence the website experience, then that's something else that you could do through that two-way integration. You could use in-session personalization. So this is not even looking at integrating all your different touch points. It's just looking at how that one touch point can be made to work better. So if, for example, you are a B2B firm and you have some content on your website relating to what sectors that you work with, and some content on your website relating to what services you deliver, then and if you had a user that went to a sector page first and then moved on to a service page, you could use personalization in order to tailor the information you're presenting from a service point of view to be more relevant to the sector the person was browsing. So a great example would probably be a professional services firm, let's say a law firm. They've got sector content relating to banking and finance, and then they've got a service page relating to tax law, for argument's sake. If someone went first to the banking and finance page and then to the tax law page, it'd be a pretty reasonable inference that that person is interested in tax law as it related to financial services, the sector they were looking at. So that's an example of an opportunity to improve the relevance of someone's experience, even just within the one visit on the one touch point, the website. Of the other examples I got here kind of stand to reason, but time and effort, we want to use simple, clear, and easy to understand copy and language with not much jargon and industry terminology, because it is frustrating when you're a customer trying to work out what this organization is talking about using words that you don't understand, you've never been familiar with. Setting expectations. If you have a application process online, tell people how long you expect it to take, tell people what the specific steps will be within the application process, and even what will happen after they apply. Within 14 days, you'll receive a response, we'll ask for this information, etc. It's not rocket science as far as these different factors that can influence how well or not so well the customer perceives your experience to be. How can this experience be measured, you might ask? I hope you're asking, because I'm a data guy at heart. So outside of all the measurement you're already doing, and I'll talk in more detail about this a little bit later on, you can look at some of these more macro measurements of the customer experience, like the customer satisfaction score, like the Net Promoter Score. Probably most people are familiar with those. It's you're normally surveying your customers and asking how good was their experience from a 1 to 10, for argument's sake, or how likely they'd be to recommend you to a friend or a colleague. And you're making inferences from that about how much people enjoy the experience that you provide. There's one thing which I think is a fantastic exercise to go through, is this price benefit map that McKinsey came up with, which is actually not just looking at you as an organization, because that's not all that matters, let's face it. It's placing you in amongst your competitors in terms of how customers perceive your price versus the benefits that they receive from the service that you deliver, or in other words, how they perceive the value of the service that you deliver, of which the experience they're receiving is one part. And obviously, if you are plotting out that map and you find that you are over here and you have the customer perceives that you have a lot of they'll receive a lot of benefits from your service, but that the price isn't so high, then you're probably going to gain more market share, or you have a value advantage. Whereas if the benefits that the customer's perceiving from your service are lower relative to that, but the price is the same, then they'll think that your value is not good. So there's lots of different ways at a macro level that you can understand how your customer experience is. There's lots of benchmarking out there, but more importantly, it is about understanding what the current state is for your organization, and then continuing to measure that over time, and seeing obviously the impact of the improvements you're making. So I want to introduce now a framework, our framework for experiential marketing, which we believe has the steps that are required in order to really do a great job of this whole customer experience thing. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the first pillar of that framework, I should say, is about knowing your customers and really putting them at the heart of everything you do, because you can't identify problems with experiences. You can't fix those problems. You can't create good solutions if you don't have a customer first mindset. So a couple of things that I would really encourage you to create as part of this customer experience journey. One is a set of personas that represent your key audience segments. So we know that customers expect an experience to reflect their context as an individual, but on the other hand, that is not really achievable, that kind of one-to-one personalization, because we are only human as marketers, and we have 100,000 visits to our website each month. It's not possible or economical, even if it were possible, to deliver a tailored experience to every one of those people. However, personas can let you identify groups of your audience, groups of your prospective customer base that have common needs, common problems, common goals, common frustrations. And in identifying audience segments that have these commonalities that you can address, that you can optimize for, you are getting closer to delivering an ideal experience to the individual. So no, it's never going to be as good as one-to-one personalization, but it sure is a lot better than complete mass communication with no personalization whatsoever. So yes, create personas, even create the personas just based off what you think and understand and know and believe in the marketing team, or in conjunction with your business development people, your customer service team, or whomever. But ultimately, you should be striving to validate and refine these personas using actual customer research, surveys, and so on. So understanding how to help someone is not just about who they are, because it's not just about who they are, because people's needs change over time. And so what we need to do is not just understand what the person's context is at one moment in time. We need to understand what the customer's context is over their entire journey with you. That is, at each interaction that they're planning to have with you, or each touch point that they might have on the journey, as I was referring to earlier. What are they actually trying to achieve? What do they not like about the experience? How are you not delivering on their needs? And what this will enable you to do when you have such a customer journey map is to actually understand way more intimately how you can talk more effectively to these customers at each point in their journey. Not just even how you can improve their experience at each step of the journey, but having this sort of customer journey map is going to make your traditional marketing activities more effective as well. Because if you are looking at kind of the awareness stage of a journey, and you actually understand where the customer is on the internet at that moment in time, what challenges they have, what goals, etc., then the marketing activities you're putting out there are going to be way more closely aligned with what the customer actually wants and needs. And then it's not just about their experience being better, it's also the case that you're going to generate more awareness, more consideration, more conversions, etc. So from this, if you did complete this map and you had, let's say an opportunities column, a row, I should say, down the bottom of each journey step, or you had a capability gap row, or whatever it is where you're identifying what it is that you need to improve and how. The question then is, what do we actually do first? Because again, we're not superhuman as marketers. We need some way in order to understand where to prioritize our efforts. So another great McKinsey execution here, although it is a pretty common prioritization framework actually, is looking at it from the perspective of how important is that touch point in the customer journey, and what is its current performance. So here we have, this is for a banking or financial services context, and obviously using the bank's products and services, like the fact that the credit card actually functions, that that I actually get the loan money, that I can withdraw money from my account, is ranked very, very high from an importance perspective. But it is very, very low from a performance perspective. Maybe in this bank's context, the internet banking is too hard to use, so the person can't transfer money, or whatever the case may be. Conversely, we have up here receiving and managing bank statements, which has a very high performance and satisfaction rating, but relatively low importance compared to actually being able to use the product or service. So if you were to say which of these or any of these should you prioritize effort in order to try and improve, you would say that you would focus on obviously the stuff that's very important to customers and that not currently performing very well. Again, it's not rocket science, but also again, we need to look at this as this customer experience optimization journey as one in which we break down into little steps, and we don't try and fix overnight. And so it's important to have a starting point. So next, I want to talk about setting meaningful KPIs. This is something that I am extremely passionate about, as any of the attendees would know if you've spoken to us and to me before, because most marketers don't actually have good KPIs. And so the question is, how do you know whether what you're doing is actually working? And when we're talking about improving the customer experience, it's no different, or especially when we're talking about improving the customer experience, because we can't just make a change on a particular step of the application process or introduce a particular onboarding program, and then just wipe our hands, job done, and assume that had an amazing effect and that journey step is all fixed now. We need some way of actually tangibly measuring what we've done to improve the situation. On the other hand, at each of those journey steps, there's actually a business outcome you're trying to optimize for as well. When the person is going through the checkout process, if you have an e-commerce website, or if they're completing an inquiry form, or whatever the case may be, it's not just important that they like completing the inquiry form, or that they view it to be a seamless, frustration-free experience, or whatever the benchmark is that you're setting about the experience of that touch point. It's also important that they actually complete the thing, because that's what you as an organization want, right? Like that's you have the inquiry form so you can generate leads, not just so that people can look at it and like it. And so you need to be trying to select KPIs at each of those journey steps that are both customer and business focused, because that's really what customer experience optimization is about, in my view. It's creating mutual value. It's getting more wins for the business in the way of revenue, leads, what have you, by making people like doing business with you more, and then they'll be more likely to do it with you. So just as some examples here, we have in the like for this e-commerce store, they have these are the more customer focused KPIs, obviously, and from a service and returns perspective, they're measuring their return rate. For retention, they're measuring their repeat purchase rate. They've got a net promoter score to measure advocacy. They have the satisfaction score on the shipping options to measure the fulfillment step of their purchase process. So the other important thing, which I always say about these KPIs, is that they have to actually directly measure the thing that you're wanting to measure, and that might stand to reason. I guess it's pretty self-explanatory when you say it in that way, but many marketers are still using KPIs like page views per session, bounce rate, etc., and that has no relationship to the customer outcome or to the business outcome. So just be careful to select good KPIs when you're going through that process. Another thing that is more and more important when it comes to these experiences that we're trying to create, deliver, and improve is the extent to which they are unified. I am intentionally not using the omnichannel buzzword, but that is what I'm talking about, where it's not enough just to have a good experience on your website and then a good experience on the phone when someone's calling your call center or a sales representative, or a good experience in your social channels. The experience needs to be unified. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be meeting the customer's needs no matter where they are, and not just meeting their needs, but also reflecting the context that you already have about them. So that goes back to what I was saying before about the two-way CRM integration, for example. And in the same Salesforce report, they have found that 70% of customers are saying that that basically this concept that I'm talking about of omni-channel marketing or unified experiences, I prefer to say it, it's very important to winning their business. It sucks when you complete an application process on the website and then you speak to a salesperson and you have to go through the process all over again. It's frustrating when you are still receiving a email marketing for something that you purchased 3 years ago. There's quite a famous, well, not famous, but I've seen it a bit, a Twitter meme from someone saying that to Amazon that this email they've received with a selection of toilet seats is actually not very relevant to them because they purchased one a month ago, and hey, Amazon, it's not the sort of thing that you actually need to buy over and over again. And that's an example of a non-unified experience where the email channel is not reflecting the context or experience that someone's had on the web channel, the website channel, I should say. You need to embrace the power, the beauty, and the concept, ultimately, of incrementality and experimentation. So here's the reality. I guess most of the registrants to this webinar, most of you listening, would be digital marketers, or at least marketers. But when we're talking about the customer experience, it is so much more than just what we can do as marketers to control it. So, like in the bank example, for argument's sake, we would never have control if we're a financial services marketer over how much the customer enjoys using our credit card in a store to pay for stuff, or an example like that. But still, we have power over some parts of that journey. There are points in that journey when the customer is coming to touch points that are within our control, that we can improve, that we can influence. And those are moments of truth too, even though, and that means that even though we can't control the entire journey, we can control some of it. And so, I mean, there's all this research about how customer experience transformation programs, and by that I'm talking about as an organizational level, trying to become more of a customer obsessed organization, have that culture like, say, Amazon does. Those transformation programs take ages. With their 3-year programs, they're 5-year programs, because they affect so many different areas of the business, and they really strike at the heart of what the culture of the business is with respect to the customers. But we can't wait 5 years in order to in order for the customer experience to be perfect as marketers, we're accountable for how many orders we're getting this month or next month or 3 months from now, how many leads or whatever other metric that you're focusing on. So let's not put our hands up as marketers and say it's all too difficult because we can't control everything. Let's focus on what we can do to control the parts that are within our control. Because even addressing some of those individual parts of the puzzle is going to have a big impact on the customer's overall perception. And the reality is that the successful customer experience transformation programs are driven as much from the bottom up as they are from the top down. So yeah, don't think that this has to be a waterfall program where 3 years from now your customer experience is fixed. The reality is that it's something that you should be working at bit by bit in an incremental kind of way. The other part of that is experimentation, and that is that this ties back a little bit to what I was saying about the KPIs that you're selecting and how they actually need to reflect success, because even if you have a good KPI and you make a change to a particular page on your website and you observe that the KPI as it relates to that page or touch point has improved, you don't actually know for sure that whatever improvement you're observing was as a result of the change that you made. It could just be that you happen to have more returning visitors that day that are more likely to convert anyway, or that an email marketing campaign went out with a discount code or something like that, and that is the kind of that factor is driving the outcome that you're seeing in terms of improvement against the KPI. So the only way that you can know for sure when you make a change that it was your change that improved what it was that you're wanting to improve is if you do it as a controlled experiment or an A/B test in layman's terms, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, there's a great quote here from the head of enterprise and cloud marketing at Atlassian, saying basically that that without experimentation, they would have no data or evidence, more importantly, about what customers are responding to, what they're not responding to, and it's that data, that evidence that means they're more likely to be doing a good job to improve the experience, rather than just making some changes and assuming it worked. So the other part to this is that we are marketers, not customers, and yet we're marketing to customers. So there's always going to be some level of assumption about what the customer wants, needs, what their challenges, pain points are, etc. And that means that there's some level of risk that the solution we put into place to address that assumption might be wrong, because we're wrong some of the time as it relates to our customers. And again, experimentation is a way to de-risk the changes that we're making in order to make sure that they're more likely to be successful. Finally, we really try and work with all of our customers to optimize the time it takes from when a marketer comes up with an idea to when they can actually get out into the marketplace and observe how well it's working. And the benefits of improving that time frame are kind of self-explanatory. So if the more you can do, the more you can learn, the more you can incrementally improve again on what it was that you learned. So what we try and do is, and I think, well, there's two parts to this. One is about the technology that you're using, and because technology does play, it's not the entire story as far as how quickly we can work, but it does play a big role in that process. And so what we encourage our clients to do in the technology platforms that we work with are ones where control is centralized with the marketing team, and that it removes dependencies on IT or on whichever other team that slow us down and prevent us from working as quickly as we'd like to. The other part to this is trying, and this is directly related to the concept of incrementality, is using a kind of modular approach and moving away from a, from a way of working in which we launch one campaign in 1 month, and then next month we need to come up with an entirely new campaign and start from scratch, and we have no leverage on the effort that we invested last month. And a great example of where this modular approach can be used to great effect would be in, say, a financial services company where there's a lot of restrictions from a legal and compliance point of view about what you can or can't say, and there's a reality that whenever you when you take some new marketing promotion into the market, you're going to have to run it through 2 weeks of that legal and compliance process first. Now, if you're using a campaign by campaign kind of approach to marketing, then every single campaign that you launch needs to go through that same process again. And again, you have no leverage. You have no increasing leverage over time on the effort already invested to get a piece of communications through that process. But if you are, let's say, focusing on launching triggered email communications over the course of a 6-month period, and you launch a welcome program in week 1 and you get it through legal and compliance, that welcome program continues to send emails and continues to work for you week after week, month after month. And then in week 2, you're not focusing on reinventing the welcome program, or you might be if you have good metrics and you've determined how well it is or isn't working, but you could be implementing an entirely new email program. And then in week 3, you're leveraging the bits of work you did before because you're still sending both of those, the week 1 and the week 2 email program. So a modular approach to working where you are basically building marketing products that continue to run over and over and over again, even when you're not there to launch them, is one in which you're going to actually create leverage on what will otherwise be bottlenecks. And again, you can improve your time to market. So I've had 3 key takeaways for you, the webinar participants, who I'm hoping I've turned into acolytes for experiential marketing. My 3 key takeaways would be this. 1, we know for sure that a better customer experience drives better marketing outcomes. It simply stands to reason when customers are saying that the experience that they're receiving is very important in their decision to buy and to have loyalty to stay with you to buy more. And so we can't ignore it as marketers. It's directly linked to what we're trying to achieve, what we're KPI'd on, what we're bonused on, or what have you. Whoops. The second thing would be that customer experience is not rocket science. In the sense that it's not hard to understand what makes a good experience. Like when I ran you through those 2 frameworks earlier, it's really just about trying to create marketing activities or experiences, I should say, which the customer is going to perceive as easy, seamless, minimize frustration, or in other words, that they feel like they're going to enjoy doing business with you. And it's also not rocket science because in terms of how you can build those experiences, because again, you don't need to try and invent or design a complete customer experience in day 1. It's just about finding that one little problem that needs to be fixed and addressing that first and then moving on. And finally, our existing ways of working are not ones where customer experience will actually substantially improve. So we need to find ways of working where we're really thinking, in everything we're doing, we're putting the customer first in our thought process. We're thinking about what their needs are first, not what we'd like to say to them, and that everything is being led from that customer need, from that customer frustration, etc. And finally, and again, couldn't reiterate enough, work iteratively and improve what you're doing, rather than viewing this as a kind of a waterfall one and done project, where you can move on to some other to some other focus. This has to be a way of life, so to speak. And with that, if there are any questions that have been entered while I've been talking, I will take them. Just one moment while I grab them. Okay, and it doesn't look like we have had any, so I will end the webinar now. Thank you very much for attending. My email address is there. Please do get in touch if you had any other questions about how you can start to deploy some of these tactics to better effect in your organization. Thank you for attending, everyone.